The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the hosts and creators of this program.
This is the Pet Buzz.
This is the Pet Buzz.
Freshly collected with news,
celebrity pet gossip,
and the latest pet trends. The Pet Buzz gives you the latest 411 on everything pet related.
Everything pet related.
Hosted by pet trendologist Charlotte Reed and Dr. Michael Fleck. And here's the Dynamic Pet Duo.
Greetings from our Pet Buzz studios in Bradenton, Florida, located on the Sun Coast. That's the Gulf Coast or the West Coast of the state of Florida, the third largest state in the country. We are happy to report that our show airs from the Pacific Northwest to the Atlantic in North America, and we are actively involved in bringing more folks the best in pet talk radio. If you've never listened to our show, we love to report on breaking news and a variety of current topics that affect the lives of pet owners and their dogs, cats, and other animals. So today we have prepared some special programming for you. This show is about race, equality, and diversity in the world of pets and pet owners.
Wonderful. So let's kick off the show with the weekly countdown. In segment 4, we are talking with dog trainer and dog expert Blake Rashad of the Top Dog Canine Foundation about the diversity of the dog training profession and if the Black Lives Matter movement has had any impact on trainers, dog training associations, and pet owners.
In segment 3, we're talking with Dr. Carly Beth Hawkins of Southern Illinois University about her study focusing on if dogs can be racist.
In segment 2, we are speaking with Steve King, president of the American Pet Products Association, about pet ownership statistics as well as diversity in the pet products industry.
And in segment 1, Dr. Fleck and I are talking about minority and the underrepresented veterinary professionals.
So joining us today to talk about the steps that are being taken to diversify the veterinary industry and what more needs to be done is Dr. Annie Daniel, the founder of the National Association for Black Veterinarians and Louisiana State University at A&M College Associate Professor of Veterinary Medical Education. Dr. Annie Daniel, we are pleased to welcome you to the Pet Buzz today.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you for having me.
So, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, nearly 93% of U.S. veterinarians are white. Why are there so few brown, black, and other minority veterinarians?
Well, from my research, what I've found is that many of or several of them, I have a whole list of 12 different items that will help to increase diversity and inclusion in healthcare professions. And almost, well, I don't want to say none of them, but very few of them are actually implemented in veterinary colleges across the country. And unless that's done, where there's outreach, holistic admissions, taking particular care at making sure that the environment is very inclusive, looking at realistic goals for diversity and inclusion, the outreach part is the key part because a lot of black and brown students don't realize that veterinary medicine is actually a career choice that they can decide to become.
You know, like we talked about, I mean, the veterinary profession is probably one of the whitest professions out there.
Yes, and that's the reason why outreach is so important, to have those black and brown veterinarians that are in the profession to get involved in outreach, go and talk about the profession so students can see people in the profession that look like them. And then once they do that, research has shown that if they don't see anybody like them in the profession and they're not aware of the profession, then it's difficult for students then to decide if they want to be a veterinarian and actually seek out the profession. So I think it's the responsibility of those that are in the profession to really get involved in outreach.
Yeah, I mean, I can see vet schools sponsoring African American, Asian, or Hispanic veterinarians and going to local communities and, for a career day and talking about the profession. Okay. So, it's curious because obviously with Black Lives Matter, the BLM movement right now, everybody is talking about racism and really opening up the things that we see. So do you find that Black and brown veterinarians are subject to racism, and most importantly, from whom?
I think it happens at multiple levels within the profession. I have talked with students who are in veterinary school that have been experiencing it. I've talked to students that have applied to veterinary school that had stellar applications that were denied admission into the veterinary program. And I have talked to professionals who are in a clinic or a professional that is actually teaching at a veterinary school. And they have, so it goes across the entire gamut of the profession as far as those different types of blatant racism comments that can be made. And sometimes if those comments are talked about or reported to a supervisor, then those people are retaliated against for making the report. And that's not across all veterinary schools or all veterinary clinics. I don't want to generalize the stereotype, but it is known within the profession that, if you just suck it up and deal with it.
Right.
And if you do report it, then you will be retaliated against. That's kind of what I've learned. There's a fabulous video that's been put out by Wake Up Vet Med. I don't know if you've seen it, but it is probably 7 minutes of different people in the veterinary profession talking about their experiences with microaggressions and just blatant racist comments that they've received. And it's called A Crisis in the Profession.
A Crisis in the Profession. We'll make sure we get that link from you and put it on our social media channels. But, one of the things that I was really interested in, and I thought this was, really at a basic level, and actually in a way kind of surprising. Doing my research and prepping for this interview, and I'm sure you'll agree, Dr. Fleck, that some of the insensitive comments and the blatant discrimination came from pet owners themselves. They were surprised to see Black veterinarians. They were surprised that Black veterinarians thought dogs were family members. They had dogs named maybe similar to the N-word if the dog was Black and it was in the South. And they actually came out and said, I don't want a Black veterinarian treating my dog. So those are the kind of things I think on a basic level, our listening audience are primarily composed of pet owners. So we kind of wanted them to start thinking about their approach to various veterinarians, whether they're Hispanic or African American or Asian or something else, because I think it's not uncommon for a Black professional to be treated or assumed to be a staff member, a nurse, or something lower. Wouldn't you say, Dr. Fleck?
We want to be inclusive as a profession and as human beings to try to include all of our people to be involved in something that is as great as veterinary medicine.
Yeah.
We're hoping that your organization will inspire more African American veterinarians to get out in the community so they can inspire others, whether it's grammar school kids, high school, or college students to be veterinarians.
And Doctor, you're in the forefront for this. Whatever we can do to help, we would love to.
Sure, but before you go, can you give us your website so we can post that on our social media channels?
Yes, it's nabvonline.org. nabvonline.org. And that's to the National Association for Black Veterinarians.
Well, we want to thank you so much for being here today.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
That was Dr. Annie Daniel, founder of the National Association for Black Veterinarians and Louisiana State University and A&M College Associate Professor of Veterinary Medical Education. And so we thank her for being here, and we also are glad that organization is taking steps to diversify the veterinary profession. All I have to say is don't go away. We'll be back with more Pet Buzz, so stay tuned.
You are listening to The Pet Buzz with pet trendologist Charlotte Reed and veterinarian Dr. Michael Fleck. We would love to communicate with you via social media. Use the Pet Buzz social media channels on Twitter and Facebook to make a comment or ask a question. Post a picture of your pet on Instagram and tell us about his or her unique personality. You can also write to us at team@thepetbuzz.com. For more information about our show, our guests, and buzzworthy freebies, visit us at thepetbuzz.com.
How often should you bathe your pet? Well, I'm pet trendologist Charlotte Reed, and I'm asked that question often. How often you should wash your dog depends on a number of factors, including his health, breed, coat, and activity level, as well as where these activities are taking place. Dogs who spend days outside rolling and things are going to need a bath far more often than the ones who spend most of their time on the couch. Or you can always take the smell test. If your dog walked into the room and you can smell him, it's time for a bath. Make sure when it's time for a bath, you gather up all the supplies, including a non-slip mat and plenty of towels. Use shampoo formulated for dogs and turn your cell phone off to avoid distraction. And if you have a dog that hates getting a bath, smear some peanut butter on the bathtub wall and let him lick it off while you bathe him. Then he'll know bathing can really be a treat.
ThePet knows there's a lot in your life that you worry about. We want to make sure your pet's flea and tick protection isn't one of them. ThePet offers vet-quality flea and tick protection that has the same active ingredients as leading brands like Canine Advantix 2 and Frontline Plus, but that cost much less, which means you can give your pet total flea protection worry-free. And the best part is, you can get ThePet flea and tick topicals delivered right to your door when you shop on ThePet.com. ThePet, helping you and your pet live your best life.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Pet Buzz, bringing you the best in pet talk radio. I'm pet trendologist Charlotte Reed. And as always, we want to talk about how current issues affect pet ownership and the pet industry as a whole, and even your wallet. As a result, this episode of this particular show focuses on race, diversity, and equality. And just so you know, we always want to hear from you, and we encourage you to join the conversation by posting your comments on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. So, pet ownership is growing in these unprecedented times, and according to Pet Product News Media, during the pandemic, pet businesses are thriving as more and more pet lovers acquire pets. But we're also curious how American pet owners and pet businesses are also dealing other issues that deal with race, diversity, and equality. So joining us today is Steve King, the president of the American Pet Products Association. So Steve, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today. And I have to thank you. Really, thanks for coming back for this special show.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you inviting me, Charlotte, because it is something that's been top of mind for us, and I really am interested in having a conversation with you about it.
You know, I think one of the greatest things that your organization does is publish the biannual APP National Pet Owner Survey, which helps members and others have better insight into the industry as a whole, and really helps them, plan business strategies. I know a lot of your members use it for that. They scour the book. And then, journalists like myself use it to understand statistics in the industry, what's hot, what's not, and just kind of make judgments from there. And one of the things that you focus on is pet ownership statistics and who's buying and what they're buying and services and really just the financial impact of the industry. And I'm curious, have you all ever included a racial breakdown of pet ownership, whether it's Asians, African Americans, Hispanics, or Caucasians?
Yes, we do, and I'm glad you asked, because it's been a part of the National Pet Owner Survey for many years now. This is the 20th year we published, and I think it's been a part of that virtually that entire time. So we do look at the racial breakdown of pet owners, including African American, Asian, Hispanic, and American Indian even. And then that data is further broken down by the species owned. So in very general terms, we know that African Americans, amongst pet owners, African Americans make up about 11%, Asians 6%, Hispanic 16, American Indian 1. So we have, I think some pretty good data that's useful to our members in understanding who their customers are.
But even let's take it a step now, because we're in a whole new phase of, we had COVID, then we had, obviously George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, the BLM movement. How has that affected the pet industry? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
I think all Americans have had to acknowledge that we still have a long way to go as a society to provide equal opportunities for people of color. It includes in policing and in housing and hiring. There are inherent biases that are still there that have to be addressed. So as much as the pet care community reflects America and American values, we really have to do more to work for diversity and equality and inclusiveness and within our companies, amongst our leadership, and in our boardrooms. So I think as much as anything else, the Black Lives Matter movement has really been a catalyst for us as representatives of pet product manufacturers to engage on the topic and help our members with education, dialogue, some concrete steps that we can take to improve the environment within our own company.
And I'm glad that you brought that up, because it kind of leads me into my next question. I haven't noticed you guys have issued any press releases. I mean, maybe there were there, maybe I just didn't see them. So I don't want to point blame, because like I said, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
Or statements discussing the topic. So I was just curious, what's your organization done to encourage diversity, equality and inclusion in the industry?
Yeah. So it's our bad for not putting this information on our website, and I'll make sure we rectify that, because we do need to make it clear that we are dealing with the issue as an organization, and we have been communicating with our members about it. About a month ago, in our newsletter that goes out to about 2,500 people within our member companies, where we publish what we call our Pledge for Action. And we didn't create this ourselves, but we partnered with the National Association of Manufacturers in supporting this pledge. And I'd like to read just a few elements of it to give you a flavor of what we have indicated to our members as part of what we are going to do as an organization going forward. So within this pledge, we indicated that we are going to speak out and stand up for justice, equality, and opportunity. We're going to make bridging the racial opportunity gap a central part of our mission. We'll strengthen our workplaces as spaces where people of color will be heard, respected, and celebrated. We'll work to improve and increase the representation of Black people at all levels of our companies and organizations. And we will diversify our supply chain by providing equal opportunity for Black-owned and minority-owned enterprises to do business with us. So, to me, that's a pretty firm statement of what our goals are. It's aspirational, of course, because we have a long way to go, but we have let our members know that that's something that we as an organization will be working towards, and we're going to help them to get there as well. So I apologize to you and to others who are looking for more guidance from us on this issue, because we are working on it, but we just haven't done a very good job yet of letting others know outside of the organization what we're doing.
Yeah, I think a statement would be great on the website, and people could actually see it as they're looking for information about your organization and kind of, see how you stand, and something that's meaningful. I mean, when we last talked off of the air, I told you one of the stores in my local Florida neighborhood, they basically boarded up their store. I mean, we had a small demonstration here. And that's what they did. I mean, so it was interesting. I mean, I can understand why they did it. They were afraid of looting and rioting, but I was just, it's nice to know that, something is coming and that you're working, with your members. And that's a great statement, and it's a great organization to partner with.
Well, thank you. And the other thing internally is that we started a diversity and inclusion task force that comprised of 9 members of our staff, all who volunteered to be a part of this. And we're working through internally how, as an organization, we can try to live some of these ideals and to encourage discussion about race and equality amongst our staff. And race does play a part in a lot of decisions that are made, whether it be consciously or unconsciously, and we want to make sure that we kind of get that out as a problem within our organization.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for taking my comments and, seriously. Any additional comments from you, Steve?
It is so important that we are reflective of what's important, to society in general, and so we're committed to it. So thank you so much for having me on the show, and give my best to Dr. Fleck.
We will. Well, everyone, that was Steve King of the American Pet Products Association. He's the big guy. He's in charge. He's helping to set policy with his great team of people. And we were discussing race, diversity, and equality in the pet products industry. Stay tuned. There's always more thought-provoking pet buzz coming up next.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
ThePet knows there's a lot in your life that you worry about. We want to make sure your pet's flea and tick protection isn't one of them. ThePet offers vet-quality flea and tick protection that has the same active ingredients as leading brands like Canine Advantix 2 and Frontline Plus, but that cost much less, which means you can give your pet total flea protection worry-free. And the best part is, you can get ThePet flea and tick topicals delivered right to your door when you shop on ThePet.com. ThePet, helping you and your pet live your best life.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Pet Buzz, the best in pet talk radio. Here at The Pet Buzz, we cover the issues that you want to hear about. This is a special edition of our show. We are talking about race, equality, and diversity in the pet world.
Well, since we are talking about race, equality, and diversity in the pet industry, the veterinary realm and the dog training world, we also want to include our dogs in the conversation to determine if it's possible that our beloved four-legged family members can be racist. So I ask you, are dogs racist, or can dogs be racist? We've covered this topic more than once on the Pet Buzz. The first time we covered it was, I don't know if you remember this, back in 2015. We spoke to Clara Jeffrey, who at the time was the editor of Mother Jones, and she wrote an article for Slate.com about her dog Percy, who she deemed to be racist. The next time was last August, in fact, of 2019. A black housekeeper was denied work at a church, and the staff blamed the priest, kind of racist dog. And in June, we brought up a Wisconsin man dressed in KKK gear walking his dog in the streets of his hometown. His action caused 3 people to call the police. So joining us today to talk about if dogs are racist is Dr. Carly Beth Hawkins, assistant professor in the Department of Psychology at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, to talk about this topic and her research study about the subject matter. Thank you so much for joining us on the Pet Buzz, Dr. Carly.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, we're going to go right into it. I'm going to dig right in with this first question. Are dogs racist?
Well, not exactly. By definition, racism requires social power. And we know that dogs don't really have social power. So by definition, they can't be racist per se. But certainly dogs can show a preference towards people based on their race. And in my work, I tend to refer to this as a racial bias.
Okay, interesting. So in 2019, you conducted a study to determine if dogs are racist. What prompted this study?
Well, I kept seeing this idea that dogs don't like black people in comedy skits. This is where I was mostly exposed to it. So Key and Peele has a skit about this. Curb Your Enthusiasm has a great one with Wanda Sykes. And on The Daily Show, Jessica Williams, who is black herself and hilarious, reported on some data that police dogs disproportionately attack black people. And she actually asked a dog trainer on the air, is that because we taste better than white people? which is funny, but, comedy aside, the data she was referring to come from an LA County Sheriff's Department report. And they reported that from 2004 to 2012, 89% of police dog bites were directed at Black and Latino Americans. So this, idea that kind of existed in the popular culture, and then this report that I read with the statistic kind of kept percolating in my head. And when I looked to the literature to see if anything existed, in the scientific literature, there was zero data. I mean, there was literally nothing that scientists had done to look into this question of whether dogs are racially biased. So that's what prompted me to study the question.
Well, I'm intrigued with studies, so tell us about your study and what were the protocols?
And who was involved?
And who's involved?
Yeah, sure. So, this was the very first study, like I said, on this question. So we started, I think, pretty humbly. And I'm a psychologist, so I'm not a dog behaviorist. I tend to study people. And so that's what I did. I started by asking people about their dog's behavior. So we collected a couple large online samples of both white and Black people who said they were a caregiver for their dog who lived in their home, and they had exposure. Their dogs had exposure to both white and Black folks in the last 6 months. And so I asked them to what extent their dogs performed a variety of positive behaviors. So, for example, allowed someone to pet them, smelled them or licked them, wagged their tail at them, all of the wonderful positive dog things that we think of. And then also negative behaviors. So, like barked at someone, growled at them, lunged at them. And I asked them in the past 6 months, how much have your dogs shown these behaviors towards white people versus Black people? So it is a self-report of their dog's behaviors. It's not the actual dog behavior, so it's a really important caveat. And like I said, this was the first investigation. So my idea was if we found something interesting here, then it might spur people, who study dogs' behaviors in the real world or in the laboratory to investigate this further.
But you had also Black families who participated in the study. So were there more?
Yeah, I collected both. Mm-hmm.
Okay, were there more African Americans or more white people who participated in the study?
Yeah, it's a great question. So definitely more white people, and that's true really of any social science research study. So I worked hard to collect a big enough sample so that we would have a decent number of Black folks as well, so we could look at their data too. But it is overwhelmingly white participants in our study.
Okay, the big question. What did your study reveal? What were the results?
Yeah, so, the first question really was, do our human caregivers report that their dogs had these racial preferences in their behavior? And what we found was that white caregivers reported their dogs showed more positive behaviors towards white people than Black people. But we also found that Black participants reported that their dogs showed more positive behavior towards Black people than white people. So there seemed to be kind of an in-group bias there among the reports of the dog's behaviors. And that's for positive behavior. So for both our white and our Black caregivers, we found no difference in their reports of negative behaviors. And I think that's really important to point out because it could be the case that people don't want to report that their dogs show negative behavior, right? We're sort of biased towards thinking our dogs are wonderfully behaved. It could be the case that negative behaviors don't happen that often. We know most dogs aren't aggressive. And so, I think that's an important thing to point out because it doesn't really tell us as much about, whether dogs would say bite, someone based on their race, from our study here. So that will require more research to understand. And then we also did see that among white caregivers, we did find small relationships between their reports of their dogs' pro-white behaviors and their own implicit and explicit racial bias, as well as their own reported contact with white and Black people. So that was something that we were interested in, that finding as well.
As a veterinarian, I think there are some pets that have veterinary biases, just as a byproduct of conversation.
I have no idea where that came from. Lastly, I don't know if you can answer this, but how can pet owners use your information, your study results, to have positive experiences with their dogs? I mean, obviously, I would think a lot of, and this is one of the mantras of dog training, socialization, starting with when your dog's a puppy, correct?
Yeah, with all the caveats, right, that this is an initial study and there are limitations and everything like that, we did find that evidence that that white caregivers, the more that they reported having interactions with Black folks, the less pro-white preference they reported in their dog's behaviors. And so, I think that it's not, there was a small relationship, but I think it's not so far to suggest that the socialization is important. And like you said, it is in line with the dog training literature and all of that as well. And so, I'm not trying to assign blame, say that white people are at fault, for their dog's behavior or anything like that. It's more, I think, a result of our segregated society in America, that people don't have a lot of interracial contact on a day-to-day basis, or that many people don't. But I do think that it is reasonable, given our findings and the literature more broadly, to suggest that caregivers increase socialization among dogs, and especially puppies, of course, with people of other races. And from the research that we have in social psychology, that suggests quite powerfully that would probably be good for humans as well.
Just
good answer.
awesome information.
Another good answer.
Well, Dr. Carly Beth Hawkins, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your research as well as your insights, which we've heard a great deal of, about dogs and racism.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, and I'm glad that you all are tackling this question. I think it's an important one, and it's one that tends to be whispered about rather than talked about, and I think it's important to talk about it. So thanks for having me on today.
Stay tuned for more of this special edition of the Pet Buzz Race, Diversity, and Equality.
You are listening to The Pet Buzz with pet trendologist Charlotte Reed and veterinarian Dr. Michael Fleck. We love to communicate with you via social media. Use the Pet Buzz social media channels on Twitter and Facebook to make a comment or ask a question. Post a picture of your pet on Instagram and tell us about his or her unique personality. You can also write to us at team@thepetbuzz.com. For more information about our show, our guests, and our buzzworthy freebies, visit us at thepetbuzz.com.
What would you do with 2.5 more years with your dog? 2.5 more years of fetch, of walks, of love. Studies show that overweight dogs live 2.5 years less on average than dogs at a healthy weight. But Slim Paws is here to help. Veterinarian recommended weight loss in one daily chew for your dog. Slim Paws, for the long, healthy life of your dog.
Trendologist Charlotte Reed.
And I'm veterinarian Dr. Michael Fleck.
We love to say it every week. We're urban,
suburban, and country.
This is a special episode of the Pet Buzz. In this episode, we're talking about race, diversity, and equality in the pet world. Well, I want to start out this segment by telling you all a story, or rather a conversation that I had more than a decade ago. Most of you know that I'm from New York, and a New York dog trainer who's the author of quite a few books and pretty well known. And I were talking about the rise of dog trainer Cesar Millan. I'm going to say this was probably about 15 years ago. Well, at that point in time, I didn't know Cesar. I knew very little about him. I had never read any of his books. But when I asked about Cesar, when I asked this dog trainer about Cesar, I think this was around the time that his show popped up on prime time. This dog trainer told me Cesar was not really a good dog trainer, but that he was just good enough for the Hispanic community. And I really have to tell you, I was aghast at that statement. I mean, at the time, I was completely floored. And I didn't really question him. And I know, looking back, even when I hung up the phone, I knew I should have. But I can tell you it was the last time that I talked to that trainer. And over the years, he's called me a few times. And I've really kept my conversations to a minimum because I wondered what he said about me. What he said about me dog training, what he said about me on TV, what he said about me being a spokesperson, and what he said about me having a radio show.
Well, why do you say that so that people understand?
I say that because I'm a mixed-race individual, and I'm proud of who I am, And it floored me that it was such a blatant racist statement that he wasn't a good dog trainer, but he was good enough for the Spanish community. I mean, did that mean he wasn't good, but he was just good enough for them? I mean, whoever you are, deserve the best.
Some people just make ignorant statements.
And that's why I have one of the best in the business who's going to talk to you now. So who's joining us, Dr. Fleck?
Well, that best in the business who's joining us to talk about dog training and racism is Atlanta-based dog trainer and dog behaviorist Blake Rashad of the Top Dog Canine Foundation. Blake is a former police officer and dog handler for the City of Atlanta Police Department. Blake, thanks for joining us today on the Pet Buzz.
Thanks for having me. How are you guys doing? Bow wow.
We're doing bow wow fantastic. Okay?
Okay. So please start by telling us why or what motivated you to become a dog trainer.
Well, what motivated me was childhood depression and anxiety, and which that pulls you away from the public and the people, and not understanding at 7 or 8 and 10 years old, you don't understand depression and you don't understand anxiety. So, but what I did understand that at my best, I felt good when I was around dogs, and I had a natural ability to understand them and to train them without any formal training.
Okay. You, my friend, are the owner of Giant Schnauzers. So when people see you with their dogs, are they shocked about your dog ownership choices?
You know, the Giant Schnauzer is getting a little bit more popular now, but I've been breeding them since 87, 88 and working with the Giant Schnauzer. And yes, always it was very shocking to people trying to understand why I chose that particular breed. And then talking to some, I actually realized there was some stereotypes. They're thinking, well, why don't you have a Rottweiler? Why don't you have a Pit Bull? And I mean, just flat out and said, you know, I was like, well, I think they're great dogs, but it's not what I want to breed and raise. I love the Giant Schnauzer. And since it was such a unique breed, it was very, I wouldn't say it bothered them, but it didn't click. They couldn't understand why.
Those are the subtle forms of racism that you find. I mean, especially in the purebred dog world, correct?
Absolutely. Even as a breeder now today, I have to check people on Facebook because they automatically assume that I don't have the knowledge to breed a Giant Schnauzer, which probably, other than Sylvia in California and myself, we probably been breeding Giant Schnauzers in the United States longer than anyone.
Wow.
Well, let's expand a little bit on that diversity. Is there a lot of diversity in the dog training profession? Are there, say, a lot of people who are brown and black represented in this field?
I've seen an increase. There are, but it depends on what level you're talking about. If you're talking about in the dog behaviorist, most of it is in your backyard breeding and your protection breeding. There's a lot of diversity in the protection world. But when you start going on talk shows and speaking to the media, social media, as well as television and radio about and answering serious questions about dogs themselves, then that narrows down to very few people of color.
Very few. I would say probably a handful. Wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. But, Blake, I want to ask you a question because when I was doing some research for this interview, I came across a statement that Karen Pryor is a well-known dog trainer and author, and she recently wrote on her website, as of June, a post entitled Black Lives Matter, statement from Karen Pryor Clicker Training. Karen really pushed clicker training to a new level. And in her statement, she wrote, Black Lives Matter, Karen Pryor Clicker Training stands with the protesters against violence Black, Indigenous, and people of color face too often. Change is needed. As positive reinforcement trainers, we know that behavior is never static. If we stay silent, we in effect reinforce past behavior, ... Black, Indigenous, and people of color are underrepresented in the dog trainer and behavioral specialist professions and related occupations. We are committed to conversations and dialogues, education, and steps that lead to greater understanding that can make the profession more inclusive. Okay. Now, it's my understanding that various dog training organizations have recently condemned racism. Are you surprised by these changes of attitude, or do you think this is joining the bandwagon philosophy of white people talking about more inclusion, diversity, and calling out racism when it's been there for a long time?
Yeah, I think more so it's just joining the bandwagon right now. It's popular. Just for the first time, you have to choose a side, especially if you're in business.
So what advice would you give kids?
Yeah.
Get involved, learn, open your mind to do what you love. The money will come. You love animals. There's so many different fields that you can go into, and then you'll be doing something you love for the rest of your life. So get involved. And there's also so many organizations that you can volunteer.
Exactly. Wow. Blake, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your sharing some of your life experiences as well as your insight, particularly with race, equality, and diversity in the animal care service industry. So before you leave, can you give us your website?
Yes, it's Top Dog with 2 G at the end, the letter K, the number 9.org. I said again, it's Top Dog, the letter K, the number 9.org.
That was Blake Rashad. He is a fantastic dog trainer and dog expert. I've known him for years. He represents one of the best in the dog world. He's a great guy and an awesome family man. So I love him. I'm so glad he was able to talk to us.
And a wonderful interviewer, too.
Absolutely. What were your impressions of the show today? Just tell me, what were your impressions of the show?
I think this is one of our most intriguing, insightful, and wonderful shows that we've presented in the last, what have we been putting them together for 6 or 7 years? It has such an impact and is so meaningful at this time as our society is going through the changes that it's going through.
Yeah.
And it's so important because, it is time to be more inclusive for really good people. Whether you're brown, black, white, whether you're Jewish, Catholic, agnostic,
Protestant,
atheist, whatever, Protestant, it's time to be inclusive for everybody that has so much talent to offer. And we just need to make sure that opportunity is there.
Yeah, but as long as we have conversations about these things. And
I'm just more concerned because I know that there's so much talent with so many different people that could be part of our profession that could really be helpful to move us forward.
I'm glad that you shared your impressions of the show, and I'm glad it was such a successful show. And like we said, we didn't do the show to preach. We did the show to really talk about what's happening in the news, but we want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear what you thought of the show.
We sure do. We really do.
Write to us at team@thepetbuzz.com or post your thoughts on our social media channels on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Unfortunately, Dr. Fleck, it's that time. Can you thank our guest?
Yes, special thanks to our guests, Dr. Annie Daniel, Steve King, Dr. Carly Hawkins, and Blake Rashad for joining us on this special edition of the Pet Buzz.
And of course, we must always thank our sponsor, the Animal Medical Center of Bradenton and EpiPet, making better skin, coat, and ear care products everywhere.
And if you missed any portion of this show, this very special show, visit our social media channels, as well as your favorite streaming channels, and listen to the Link podcast on Monday morning. And most importantly, remember, we're here each week to help you take better care of your pets.
Peace out and pet love.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Pet Buzz. The Pet Buzz is hosted by the dynamic pet duo, pet trendologist Charlotte Reed and Dr. Michael Fleck. Tune in each week for the latest 411 on everything pet related. Visit our website at www.thepetbuzz.com. Learn more about us, the show, and our guests.
My name is Mike Ruiz, and I was born and raised in Montreal, Canada, and now I live in New Jersey. The thing that made me fall in love with Oliver was the very first time I met him. He was being fostered by a friend of mine whom I was visiting. I opened the door to my friend's house, and Oliver came running up to me, sat at my feet, and looked up at me with the most beautiful, big, brown, soulful eyes. And within 24 hours, I had filled out all the paperwork, and Oliver was my son. I've experienced a lot of discrimination with Oliver. We would walk down the street and people would literally cross the street. When they would see us coming, they saw like a menacing pit bull type dog. I just found it so baffling because Oliver was the sweetest, gentlest creature that I've ever met in my entire life. Sadly, I lost Oliver in August of 2018. I wanted to commemorate him in a way that was very meaningful, so I got this tattoo of him. It's just such an amazing thing. Knowing that I carry him in my heart, I now carry him on my arm. My name is Mike Ruiz, and Oliver and I are individuals.